The following podcast may be disturbing to those who support hatred, terrorism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of How We Fought Against. And today it seems like I'm on the hot seat.
Correct.
So first of all, let's say Chag Sameach, Happy Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. This is an opportunity to kind of wrap up the year and wish everyone a much, much better, healthier, more successful 2021.
Yes, for sure.
So let me introduce my friend, my colleague, Nadav, or formerly known as Ned Steinman. Nadav, why don't you introduce yourself? You do it much better than me.
Sure, thanks. So I'm originally from Canada, a relatively new OLED, just a few years in Israel. I spent a career in corporate law, many decades, in big law firms, and loved it and enjoyed it a lot, and spent many years coming back and forth to Israel, but actually made the decision to make Aliyah. And when I decided to sort of wind down the practice and get involved in different type of client work, where the client is actually the Jewish people in the state of Israel, I was introduced to Yifa, and I came to her with a really tough negotiation, if you recall.
Yeah. And
I said that I'm looking for actually a job. I really want work to do. But I have two important conditions, if you remember. And those conditions were, number one, I don't want to be paid. And number two, I wanted my own email address, right? Yeah. Those were my two tough conditions. So she agreed, and we had a hard negotiation, but she agreed.
Yeah, the Jewish people don't pay as well as corporations or worldwide.
That's fine. It was good. It was all good. So I've been a volunteer for our organization for over a year now, and I'm loving it. And so now I'm turning the tables, and I'm going to ask you to sort of give us a highlight of some of the top things that we've done in this past 2020. I want to know what your thoughts are.
Well, 2020 was something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to think about, just three things that I'm happy about, or that I think were strategic, or we've done so much. But I think I would choose three things as the most important things, I think, strategically, that has happened in 2020. And the first one was just happened recently. It's kind of a closure that just happened recently. I don't know if you at home followed this, but the American administration came out with a new labeling guidelines, labeling of products coming from Israel and the territories that Israel controls, and put an end to a big cloud that was cast about 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, about how Israeli products that are manufactured and produced in the territories should be labeled. And this is something that I have to say, I started working on this. We were a small organization, almost no money. I remember saying that, working at McDonald's at the time would probably, be more, would pay more. And so we came out with, we understood that there was a new labeling guideline, or some kind of an attempt to say that it's a reissuance of old guidelines. And I remember days and nights kind of trying to understand and research what this was about, where this has come from. So it really made no sense. I mean, if you understand the history, if they're saying that this was always the American policy to label these products as made in the West Bank or made in the Gaza Strip, then you would think back and say, how did this happen? When did this happen? And how come no one knew about it? It doesn't consist with any other American policy that we've known about. So we sat down, did the research and wrote this extensive report. And then it was about reaching out. How would we reach out? How would we make a difference? Just a small organization working from Jerusalem at the time. And we've made it to many senators and congressmen, and we basically exposed what we thought was a possible fraud. I mean, it was really that bad. And so it made a huge difference at the time, because they've never actually enacted that policy or that reissuance of that policy. But seeing that happening, right? I mean, like just when was this, last week or 2 weeks ago, when they come out and say we're putting an end to this, because one of the things that we've said is that it doesn't matter that you don't enact the actual policy, as long as it's in the books, someone can come around, the next president after that, doesn't matter, and say, well, we have this since 2016, we have this in the books, so we're now going to actually act on it. And it's going to be very difficult, as years go by, to say, well, remember that fraud that we pointed out to in 2016. So this was an amazing closure for us. I mean, we've worked on it so hard for so many years, and look at what we've accomplished. So I have to name that as number one. Okay,
so hope number two is my favorite. So go on.
I have a feeling that I know what you mean with that. So I imagine that you're talking about the food vendors case, right?
Yes.
All right. Yes. So the food vendors case was also something that was special to me because for a year at least, or maybe more, I've been talking to people about anti-Semitic discrimination, which can in its modern way of expression, you can see it oftentimes as anti-Zionist discrimination or anti-Zionist harassment, hate speech, etc., etc. So I used to give this example. Just imagine that you are discriminated against because you're a Zionist, and then this thing happened, right? I mean, we get the information from our network in Canada, and we learned that there's a restaurant in Toronto that literally put up a sign or a hashtag on Instagram that says Zionists are not welcome. And so I said, look, I mean, this is what we're talking about. Look how fast it declined. It turned into anti-Zionist discrimination per se. This is completely anti-Semitic, and this is our chance to make the argument and to build, the very first case law ever, right? To build a precedent that we can use in Canada and, of course, then all over the world. This horrible, horrible story that has happened, and it was amazing to me that someone would be so blunt about their hatred and discrimination. And so, we started talking to this amazing woman, a Holocaust survivor. She's 86. She's amazing, from Toronto, and she really wanted to do something about it. And we said, we'll happily represent her. And this is where you come in, because you are still licensed in Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, amazing that I'm taking my license in Ontario to launch a claim under the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. So it's a totally turn of events for me. But I think the precedential value of this in showing how, in fact, the definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA definition of anti-Semitism, is now going to be used as a tool in order to fight against someone's hashtag and basically to show that their actions are anti-Semitic and really fall within that definition. So that to me is really crucial.
I think this case, right? I think first of all, it shows that being so the fact that we're so obsessive about these issues, right, running around after anti-Semites all the time, it kind of enables us to see a certain trend as it comes along and maybe even foresee how it will develop. So that was one thing. And the second thing was that look at the value of the network that we have, because, we were contacted by, residents of Ontario and to bring this up to us. And then look at how amazing is this, team of lawyers that we now have. I mean, it started with us, right? And it's now has grown to, I don't even know how many people we have. We have like 10 lawyers on the team, and then other people just want to help and be a part of it. So I think that is for sure, something, number two in my 2020
Okay,
list.
Awesome. Number three.
So number three, I have to say, is the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And the reason that I think it was so important is because, unfortunately, I think that what is now happening to Israel in the ICC is what everything kind of boils down to is, the delegitimization campaign of Israel kind of boils down to an international criminal court now looking into things that, it's really sad to say, are completely ridiculous. And so the State of Israel is not an official party to the Rome Statute. So the State of Israel has taken a decision not to take part in officially take part in the proceedings, because they're not a member of the court. And so who would stand up and say this is a ridiculous case? Who would stand up and say, these arguments and counter the arguments and submit papers and stand in front of the court and fight for what's right? So it had to be us. Us is like, civilians. It's people like you and I. And so, and I do believe, and I am very, very concerned of how this will turn out, because unfortunately it's very, very popular. I mean, to be against Israel nowadays, and this is something that we all need to kind of stop and take count. What is our role in letting this get so bad? But what we've done is we got an amazing group of people together. We've researched and coordinated and submitted amicus, like Friends of the Court, to the ICC. We were admitted as Friends of the Court to the ICC. We were involved and cooperated and dealt with a lot of the different parties. And so this is, I think, something that I'm very proud of. Just to get this far, I think, is an amazing success. If you look at what happened in the ICC, how many organizations and experts have actually submitted in favor of Israel, and how many countries.
Including Canada.
So, I kind of envisioned, we were waiting, we didn't know, right? I mean, we tried to write to a lot of countries and explain to them why this would be a huge mistake in terms of international law. This would be a huge mistake in terms of the precedent and what this can actually do to their own interest, which, it is unbelievable what people can't understand nowadays. And just to kind of hit the refresh button, I mean, that day was insane. We kind of waited to see what will happen. And then we see all these countries submitting, and Germany and Hungary and the Czech Republic and Canada, and it was, an amazing feeling.
So Yifa, I want to take you back to something, because you mentioned something about when you started this, and you could have made more money working at McDonald's than what you're working now. So you highlight these three things, and I agree those are probably the most important things that we should be talking about this year. But I want to talk a little bit more you. Okay. Tell me, I think I want to know more about what you felt at that time. You've highlighted these three things, but why focus on those things? And how did it make you feel? Like, how did it make you feel then, and how does it make you feel now? And I think it's an important story to tell, because if you go back to that time, you had colleagues who were probably working at large law firms in Tel Aviv, working on M&A deals around the world, and you're fighting a different battle. So how did you feel then, and how do you feel now? I want to hear more about your story.
Well, it's funny, because when I started doing what I'm doing, so most people thought that I was completely crazy. I mean, this was not a very popular cause, and I think mostly it's because people didn't understand the need, right? So go make money, build your career, build your name. What the hell are you doing? And so I don't know. Like, for me, if people don't understand, when you run an organization, it doesn't matter what it does, it's still a business, right? So there's accounting, and there's paying rent and salaries and employees and a lot of headaches. So that's, we have in common. But at the end of the day, when you wake up in the morning and you say, it doesn't matter even if I move the needle just a little bit, that's what's important to me. And I thought, I thought this might actually be developed into, and we've already seen this, like I'm talking about, 11, 12 years ago, it was already notable that this might actually turn into, the war of our generation, right? So this will be the determining factor of whether the state of Israel and kind of Jewish independence will survive, to the next millennium. And so that, for me, that was where I wanted to be. Doesn't matter if, I just, it didn't take up a lot of money, it didn't take up a lot of space, it's just trying to do my best. And I was very hopeful that this will turn into something. But, in the beginning, we used to hitchhike. I remember the first time I went to the European Parliament, and people said, why are you wasting time and money going to the European Parliament? It's pointless. And we didn't have any money. So, we stayed at this family of friends, whoever someone connected me with. And it was like an hour and a half walking distance from the Parliament. So sometimes I walked, and sometimes I tried to hitchhike in Brussels, which was mad. But you know what I mean? But we wore this as a badge of honor. We get whatever it takes. It kind of made us feel like we're in the trenches doing this. So, seeing these type of things, come into and these amazing results. I mean, even sometimes after 5 years, right? So there's an incredible result, something completely insane that you have accomplished because, you know, you were crazy enough to waste time, right? Nights and days researching this paper trail that no one thought to look at. So I think, you know, now in retrospect, I've developed this approach over time that, you know, if I have an idea and I don't hear people telling me that it's crazy, then I start to question if it's not, you know, maybe it's not such a good idea because it, you know, it's just obvious. Then, you know, maybe it's not.
Why fight the battle of the obvious?
Maybe it's not a good idea, you know. So so I think that, you know, all those days when you have to do accounting and pay the rent and not make maybe as much money as your friends now that are partners and stuff like that. But, you know, you just wake up with a smile on your face because you've shut down terror funding and you've changed some legislation and you won, you know, a case for terror victims and you defeated anti-Semitism in one way or another. And I think that's its own reward.
Yifa, we talked about the highlights of the past year. But tell me again, I think everybody needs to know, how did you start this NGO? Tell me about the genesis of the idea and how did you actually start it?
Well, I started this as a after work project, I would say. Back then I was very involved in TPS, which is, you know, the first and only Israeli news agency. And I thought it was extremely important to help kind of reach the source of the news, to be the ones disseminating the news so that, you know, news outlets would get this correctly. But then, you know, I had this, you know, legal experience and a lot of connections and a lot of, you know, goodwill. And so I used to do this, you know, after hours, if you want to, like that. And I think it eventually exploded because I found so many people that kind of wanted to be connected and needed help and raised a lot of questions and didn't know who to turn to and were very, very excited about the idea that maybe now, you know, we can kind of work together and achieve a lot of these different goals. And so I think one of the most life-changing, if you want to call it that, experiences that I've had was it was during Protective Edge, right? And so 2014. And I've gotten a draft resolution from the European Parliament. They wanted to, you know, condemn Israel for everything under the sun. I don't even remember, it was vile. And you know, it made me so angry. And I thought, you know what, maybe we should prepare a report that kind of, you know, shows the mistakes, if you will, the inaccuracies of that resolution, right, and show the evidence to that. And maybe we can make a difference with that resolution. And so, you know, I remember it was, I thought it was a very impressive report. Like, it was long, it was well documented.
That you prepared.
That I prepared. And I've sent it around, like I've made a list. I remember I tried to find somebody who has, you know, like a list of names and emails of all the hundreds of MEPs in Europe. No one had that. So I said, hours, you know, kind of finding each and every name and email and everything, and I sent that around. And so what happened was this. I didn't get many responses back, but one, I don't know what made the guy actually spend time doing this, but he wrote me back saying, look, I mean, what you've prepared it looks on its face very, very, very nice, very impressive, but it doesn't matter. I actually said that. It doesn't matter. And why? Because I've received something like 400 plus, you know, reports, wow, coming from the other side saying the exact opposite to what you're saying. And so basically all I have is your report. So with all due respect, I mean, it's meaningless, like literally meaningless.
So what did you do from there?
So I wrote him back and I really thanked him for writing me this email, and I asked maybe he would be willing to send me back like a list of names of organizations and experts that, and also a few of the reports just to see. And so he did. Look, he spent time doing that. And so I looked at it and let me tell you what I found, okay? So first of all, you have like 400 something names of organizations and experts coming from every single corner of the earth. Like, you know, there's someone from Japan, there's someone from Australia, that anywhere on planet Earth, okay, are so concerned with this that they've sent this report. And now you open the report and guess what? Copy paste, it's almost identical,
Every report.
Every report that I've seen, at least, every single paper that was signed by a different organizational group was practically identical. So what did that teach me? A, there's a network. There's a network on the other side that is wow, that is so impressive, that is huge, that is big, and also that someone is sitting somewhere and pulling the strings. Because unless, I don't know, an angel came to every single one of these 400 plus people in their dream and told them exactly what to write and how to write it, there's someone in the back that you can't see that is kind of orchestrating this whole thing. And so this is when it hit me. Like, if we don't start working on creating a network of our own, if we don't start to cooperate, if we don't increase the numbers, if we don't create coalitions, if we don't coordinate some of the efforts, then it doesn't matter, because I don't know, that specific report that I've sent. Maybe it was brilliant, I don't know, hopefully. It doesn't matter, but that was the point. It doesn't matter, because there's only you, and there are 400 people on the other side. And I think today probably there's 4,000, right? I mean, unfortunately they've grown since then. But, so that kind of, it was that moment that it became very clear to me that this needs to be, number one priority.
So you have this knowledge, you go to the EU, you can make a difference. You, one person, can make a difference, right? So then how did you start the NGO? Was that the genesis of the idea in order to start the NGO because you need to create this network? Today we have a network of over 3,000 lawyers around the world. But you created a network that's a legal network. It's a different vehicle than all the fantastic other organizations that exist, in Israel, outside of Israel, that support our causes. But at the same time, we have a legal focus. So what made you think about the legal focus, and how did you actually start?
So, first of all, I think that, the law is kind of relevant to everything that most organizations do. I mean, if you talk about legislation, they're all kind of attacking Israel in what I like to call pseudo-legal arguments. So, like using the word illegal occupation. It doesn't matter to anyone that there is no such thing as illegal occupation under international law. I mean, there's occupation, but no illegal occupation, but still everyone uses that, even in official documents. So you see everything kind of goes back, to somehow to the law. Of course, litigation, if you want to enforce policy, if you want to make a difference in that way, or legislation, or influence resolutions, or even to shut down funding. Everything is related to the law. And so I thought this is something very central, and look at that coincidence, I happen to go to law school, so we can use that. So I started very, very slowly. Like, I reached out to everyone that I've ever been in contact with around, these issues of antisemitism, terrorism, and BDS, and delegitimization generally. And kind of pitched the idea. And so I've there was a first kind of initial group of lawyers that helped me, make this into an organization. And then we had more and more and more activists. And then we thought we need our legal network. Like you pointed out, there are 3,000 lawyers, but still we need a network that is bigger than just lawyers, because we need to help others, and they need to help us, and we need to coordinate and cooperate. So the network is actually bigger than that, thank God. But there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, every day you speak to people, you add more people to the network, you get people updated. I mean, you reach out. There's still a long way to go. But yeah, this is.
Tell me about day one of ILF. I'm curious about day one. Like, how did you start day one? How did you get there?
So I think what's interesting about, my story and a lot of people's stories is that you don't know exactly when was day one, right? Because in the beginning, it depends. If you have a reach back, I don't know, you come from a very wealthy home, you can do something from home and just wait until it becomes into but, the rest of us, we still have to have a day job. Right. And so you have a day job and you make, a lousy salary doing your day job. And I started a new thing, which was, TPS that I mentioned. So it was great, but we still made less money than, people at McDonald, as I said. So I did this, nights, weekends, in between, coffee breaks, whatever. So I don't know when day one was. So it was small. It was, a few people, then a few more 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 people. And then, I said like, oh my God, this needs to become like a full-time thing, because look at how many, projects and ideas and people and requests and da 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 da. And so that's when it became really big. And I decided, okay, now we need to start looking for funding for this thing. But I have to tell you, like when I first started this, there wasn't a name for it. I didn't know where it was going. I just thought, you know what, this is something I believe in. I'm good at it. I enjoy it. Let's see where it goes. And so, if it grows, it grows. And then, there's the next challenge. All of a sudden, you have to, from being a lawyer and a smartass and an activist, you need to also become like a fundraiser. I don't have the skills for that. Or then you have to become a marketing person. I don't have the skills for that. And then you have to, you know what I mean? So it grows and develops.
Then I got to ask you, like, where did you get the strength for all this? Because it takes a lot of your own personal strength. And is it because you see the results happening? I mean, we're talking about the food labeling case. The product labeling case, this has been, almost 5 years in the making. And 2 weeks ago, we can raise our hands in victory. So is it the long battle, or are you looking for that success? It's not like as we go to those lawyers, like I was working on a deal, we did the deal, yay. Now let's go to the next one. It's a very different process. So where did you get the strength to keep continuing this and to keep with this organization and having it grow to where we are now?
A lot of the battles are long-term battle. Like it's a marathon. I mean, this is how I see it. And I spent a lot of my time as a teenager, because I was very, politically, mindful, and I was very curious. I was very confused. It was a very confusing time. So I used to just go and speak to, it was before the barrier, the fence, the security fence or anything. We used to go down to Judea and Samaria and with some Palestinians and talk to them about it and try to kind of understand and learn the culture of different people, why people want what they want, and what is it that they really want. So I learned one thing, like, it's all about the long game. And this is something that, unfortunately, a lot of Israel's enemies have that thorough understanding that it's not about, what happens now. It's about if you see yourself as a part of a process, if you're going and you're continuing to go forward in the right direction, that's a victory. And this is something that we don't have. We're a part of 21st century even, Western society that, for me, sometimes if I open my computer and try to find something on Google, it doesn't come up in 2 seconds, I'm just about ready to break down the computer, because that's how we are raised, right? But this is a long process. This is a social process. It takes time and energy and determination. Nothing's going to happen in a day. And this is something that you have to take into account. And so, and together with that, I have to tell you, we do sometimes have, short-term victories. We do something within a few days. Terror organization is getting, their finances are getting shut down, no more credit cards, no more donor box, no more PayPal. So, these type of things also kind of help you, cheer you up along, very long processes that you're trying to make on other things. But let me tell you one example. Like that first time that I went to the European Union, it was years ago. It was maybe 5-6 years ago, back when we used to hitchhike. So it was my first encounter. I said, we need to go down to the European Parliament because we need to start talking to these people. And, you used to hear a lot of Europe is lost, they're all anti-Semitic, but who's talking to them? Why would they have...
No one was talking to them at that time. No one from Israel was talking to them.
No one was talking to them. Right. So how would you expect, a different result? Who is talking to them? So, I went down there, had no idea who to meet. Like, I try to pull some strength and get people there. Maybe you know somebody, maybe you know somebody. So I had a few meetings. And you see, like, the anti-Israel organizations are like, this is their home. They're high-fiving everyone in the hallway. And there's no one that ever came from Israel, or, almost no one except for the foreign ministry or maybe one or two local organizations. And so I had a meeting and I introduced myself. So I go back home 2 days later. I get a phone call from someone that I met over coffee just a couple of days earlier. And she says, why don't we give it a try, okay? So I got a draft of a resolution, and maybe you have something you want to say about this. And the story was there was a family that, years back, they drove on one of the roads, I think in Samaria, and they were ambushed by terrorists, and they stoned the car. And Adele Beaton, that was the girl's name. I don't know, a lot of Israelis don't know the name. And she suffered a severe head injury. And for 2 years, she was hospitalized and treated, and then eventually, unfortunately, she died. And so the resolution discussed her, and basically said that this was not a terror attack, that the Israeli government kind of concocted this whole crazy story. It was just a car crash, and they just randomly went into one of the villages and arrested randomly just a few young men. That was a resolution to condemn Israel and to demand the release of these men.
For a terrorist attack that happened against an Israeli citizen, it became our fault.
Exactly, and a 2-year-old that eventually died at the age of 4 from the head injury. And so
what did you do?
So it didn't take me too long, right, to access the media reports at the time, also with foreign media. So it's not just Hebrew that reported, because it was a 2-year-old girl. So affidavits and protocols from the court itself that showed the process, eyewitnesses reports, different things. And so I didn't know what would come of it. I sent her the information. Resolution's gone.
Amazing.
Gone. So this was like the first time I've ever been to the European Parliament. This was the first case that someone brought to me and said, you know what, it's the first time I have a contact, so maybe you have something to say about this. And it could have easily ended up in a way that, we just opened up the newspaper on that Thursday and seen look at what the European Union has done again against Israel, because no one was there to actually make the conversation and present the argument. So it's not always this easy, okay? But, these short kind of sweet victories, and this was the major thing, just to imagine for her family what that meant, right? It's not just a small thing. And so I think that's kind of, the driving force. Also that it's a fun job because it's my role to be a smart ass and I get paid for it. So.
Good for you, because we like that. So taking the smart ass role, where do you see us going next year? Where do you think the focus is going to be?
Wow. So this is what I think, okay? I think BDS was a brilliant idea on their part, right? I mean, they took the idea of the Arab boycott, which is to isolate the Jewish state and destroy it financially, credibility-wise, et cetera, et cetera. That didn't work because what the Arab boycott did was actually they were not shy about the real purpose of this movement. Right. We want to destroy the state of Israel. Right. Either you on board with us or we're going to be against you. That was their message. And so they had a lot of power with the oil and the money, but eventually that kind of came into an end when the era of human rights kind of became more dominant in the Western liberal world. Okay, that's what killed the Arab boycott eventually. Laws that were passed in the U.S. and Germany, in France and other places as well. So what they did was brilliant. It's just brilliant. Look, I mean, they thought this was an amazing idea, right? We're just gonna have to turn it around a little bit to fit the narrative of the,
current time, right? Exactly.
So we're going to make this a human rights issue, but, advocate for the same goal, which is boycott, delegitimization, isolation, right? And so I saw it coming. Like it was meant to work because it was so brilliantly designed. Okay, no one knew that the terrorist organizations were behind it. No one knew who's actually paying the money. No one knew where the money is going to, which is right back in the hands of terrorists. And so this is why it was so successful for such a long period of time. But then, it's not just people like us, it's other organizations, obviously, all around the world started pointing out and proving the fact. Look at the terror ties, look at the terror connections. I mean, there was an amazing lawsuit that we filed together with a law firm in Washington, D.C.
JNF lawsuit.
Yeah, KKL, JNF lawsuit with Heidemann, Nudelman, and Kalik in Washington, D.C., and to kind of prove that link between the BDS movement and terrorist organizations. Right. And so once we started kind of making those links between BDS, anti-Semitism, and terrorism, then the whole brand of BDS started its decline. It's not dead yet, unfortunately. I mean, it's still very much alive, but if you look at where it was 2 years ago, the brand, and where it is today, it's a different story. So I think, as far as I can analyze what's going on, I think that the new goal of this evil movement is to try to separate the ingredient of what we call the Zionist identity, or the Zionist component of our Jewish identity, and to present it as a merely political ideology.
So we're now isolating Zionism as politics, right? And so if you're anti-Zionist, you're just you're just discrediting a political ideology, right?
Yeah.
So, and we need to defeat that because why? What's wrong?
I mean, look at what's going on today. I mean, if you want to attack a politician, a political policy,
Sure.
a candidate, even a president or a candidate for presidency or prime minister, you can say anything. You can say the most vile things. I mean, this will not be considered hate speech. I mean, political speech is protected even to a greater extent than freedom of speech,
Correct.
right? So that's the game. I mean, if they can convince the world that this is nothing but a political ideology or a political movement, right? Then you can say anything. You can bash Israel, you can bash the Zionists, you can discriminate against the Zionists or the Jews, actually, de facto. And that would be completely legitimate.
So then why isn't it strictly a political ideology?
Well, I think that it's mind-boggling to me that people are even, slightly convinced that this is a political ideology. I mean, even people that are not religious, don't keep necessarily, Shabbat or kosher or anything, that we know how integral that part is in our Jewish identity, right? I mean, if you think about what is Zion, people don't know. What is Zion? Zion is Israel. That's what it is. It goes back, it's written in the Bible. You don't have to believe in the Bible as a religious document, right? You don't have to believe the theological
underpinnings of it, but we know that it's written Zion, and we know what they're talking about.
Exactly. So, even from the perspective of understanding how consistent those annoying Jews are, okay? So the Jews have been consistent in their praying for Zion, talking about Zion, saying that Zion is an integral part of their identity in every holiday, in every prayer, every time you get married, every time there's anything in the Jewish culture, tradition, or faith, or religion. It somehow connects to Zion, Zionism, Israel, Jerusalem, etc., etc. So this is, how can you say it's a political ideology? I mean, if it's entrenched so profoundly in everything that is Jewish, as I said, it doesn't have to be religious. So you can be a Jew that don't keep kosher or don't go to shul on Shabbat, but it still is all around you in terms of your.
But Yifa, let's agree that before 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And up until the creation of the state, it was a political ideology.
I think that there was a period of time, right,
yes.
since Herzl, which was the end of the 19th century,
right.
until about 1948. So Zionism, in addition to being such a spiritual, religious, social component, it also started becoming a political goal. And what was the goal?
Right.
The establishment of a Jewish independent state in the land of Israel. It wasn't always. We talked about Uganda,
right.
But generally speaking, that was the Zionist movement. Now, what happened in 1948 was that movement that had one political goal. I mean, they fought against them, like how to do it, when to do it, But that was completed, right? So there was an establishment of an independent Jewish state in the land of Israel. So what is Zionism now? What is it now?
Well, I think it's Zionism now is anything from the left to the far right, to the far left, to the far right. Anybody can call themselves a Zionist, right?
Yeah, so just look at Israel, right? We just went through 3 elections in 1 year. I mean, us Zionists can agree on one thing, right? I mean, there's a 4th election coming up, maybe, I don't know, but there's talk about 4th
right.
election. And so, you can have 2 people, right? One is advocating for the greater Israel, and we should do this and we should do that, and the other one is advocating for, let's narrow the whole thing down and just, have a Jewish state just around Tel Aviv, whatever, right? And they're both Zionists.
Right.
So what are we talking? Where is the political ideology? And still, that component of getting married and holidays and this and that, it still remains, completely separate from politics. So what is it that we're talking about? Now, we should not forget the fact that, just like we said in the beginning, that, anti-Semitism or Jew hatred or all these racist movements are always adjusting themselves to the spirit of the time, right? So what is the current evil that we need to address? This is what will pin the Jews, we'll pin on the Jews.
Right.
So, back when religion was, central in the world, so we were, sons of Satan, infidels, killers of Christ,
right.
The whole thing. So, all right, that was anti-Semitism back in the day. Then religion started kind of declining a little bit, right, in Europe especially. And so then it became about race. So we know how that ended up, right, with
Right.
Nazi Germany and
Right.
the Holocaust. But it wasn't just them. It was all over Europe. It was in Russia. It was in Poland. It was in all over the world. And today, when there's when the thing to talk about is human rights, then now what is the evil? What is the embodiment of evil in the mindset of Western liberals today? Racism, apartheid, human rights violation, oppression, colonialism. Okay, so let's pin that on the Jews.
Right.
And look at that. It worked again. Right. Okay?
Correct.
So I think this is why it was so wise, to turn the conversation out, as to separate, like Zion. We don't hate Jews, God forbid, right? I mean, like that woman from Food Vendor. Some of my best friends are Jews.
Best friends are Jewish, right?
Look at that. It's just so beautiful. It's just about the Zionists. So the Zionists, and she said that. It's just amazing. Look at what she said. It's like, we're so evil, so white supremacists, colonialists. Everything that you get. The Greater Israel Project, she said. What is the Israel Project, for God's sake? Do you know what that is?
Don't know.
I have no idea what that is. And so everything bad in the world that you can think of
is pinned on the Jews.
It's pinned on the Jews.
Through the label Zionism.
Exactly, because that's easier. It's smart and easy. Most people don't know what Zionism is. Even Jews. Why would you deal with your own identity so obsessively? Why? Just people just live in the world. I always think about, when I was very, very young, I used to question, like, why do you have, gay pride parades? What's the idea with the pride? Can we all just be proud of who we are, and what's the big deal? And only through that experience that I've had with anti-Semitism that I understood that. Because when someone questions your identity to that extent, then you have to deal with it.
Right.
You have to deal with your identity.
So would you say that our project, one of the focuses we need to have for 2021, is really to understand this isolating Zionism as a political entity and attacking why that is just incorrect? It's not true, right? It's just not true.
I think more than that. I think that, first of all, I think that a lot of the success that they've had was to distance a lot of Jews from Zionism, from Israel.
Right.
And I think it's very, for me personally, but also I think strategically, is to kind of reach back out to all these Jews and say, look, it's not about policy. It's not about the prime minister. It's not about whatever political party you support or don't support. It's a lot. It's a lot higher than that. It's on a spiritual level. It's a part of our tradition, our ancestry, our heritage, and it's not about necessarily being religious. And it's not about anything else. It doesn't. There's no collusion between that and liberal values. Quite the opposite. Right. Quite the opposite. How can you? The most fundamental principle I think in liberalism is to accept a person for who you are. Right. It's not about who I'm trying to force you to be. It's about who you say you are.
Right.
So as I said, like if we have been consistent in our connection with Zion and Zionism for 5,000 years, if you're a real liberal, the very least you need to do is just kind of respect me for that. That's it. Like, you don't have to believe it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Exactly. I think that the message I want the people to get from this is that we learn a lot about success stories of people building businesses, and we all know those stories. But we don't know the stories in this venue. We don't know the NGO story. But I think it just follows a similar path. I think it comes from a crazy idea. Facebook was a crazy idea. Let me just join my friends together so we can see each other's pictures. And I think you created something here, fun. I think that's what needs to be commended, because whatever that day one was, I don't think anybody would have imagined that you would have this network where you might have a little case in Toronto against this racist restaurant, but at the same time, we're submitting briefs to the International Criminal Court, and we're winning some battles on labeling from Israel, and in the same time, we're also being able to have an impact and sometimes actually making a difference. So I think this is an opportunity for us to remember that one person can make a difference, and now we have this incredible staff and this office, and we're fighting this battle, and we continue to fight this battle, but we feel that we have something to emulate, and I think you're that person that we want to emulate. And as a lawyer who joined this great organization, I see that we can actually make a difference. It's slow and it's incremental, but I wanna thank you for being the one who started it. I think that's what we also have to highlight and remember. This organization is much more than just Yifa Segal, but it really is something that you created, and I hope that it continues for many years. But I hope it also ends when the world sees that we don't need to fight this battle anymore.
No, I think one day we can start dealing with animal rights and
I look forward to that.
The
environment in Israel, exactly.
There's no more of this rubbish going on in the world. But let me tell you something, because when you were saying a small case in Toronto and Ontario and stuff like that, so I think it's the same. It's the same idea. You never know. Like, I would never remember the quote this correctly, but you don't know that you're living through history while you're living it, right? Something like that.
True. So
I have this vision that this one case in Ontario will become a global precedent that we can all kind of build from once we win the case, hopefully, and this is what we plan on doing, by the way. Even the people that are sitting at home and they have a big dream or a small dream and they want to do something small. You don't know. Like, I don't know. I went to law school. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea that this, will develop to be this. And maybe 5 years from now we'll develop into, I don't know. Like, who knows?
That's right.
I mean, just do what you're passionate about. I don't know.
Well, thank you. I want to say thank you. So, Yifa, what everybody wants to know, and what I hope to get the world out to know, is how can they follow your work and follow the stuff that we do? What can people do?
Well, remember that I said that marketing and PR is the right thing. But we do have people who it is their thing. So follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel. We have this podcast. We have a newsletter. We have a membership list of people that get updates and newsletters. Just email us, write us, Facebook us, YouTube us,
follow,
podcast
subscribe, right?
Spotify us, something.
Great, thanks, Yifa, and wishing everybody a good holiday season, a different one, which we're going to find. But we look forward to 2021, and may there be a change in the world. In everyone's health, as well as in our opportunity to grow this organization and to continue this fight under your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadav. And I would also say that if you need materials on the IRA working definition, on terror financing, on all these different things that we actually sit and actually do, then contact us and we'll be happy to give you all the materials that you need to learn more about it.
Thank you.